Hi, this is Joey with the Whole Cow Project, and I wanted to welcome you to our virtual farm tour. This is the farm tour with our cattle, and I wanted to kick this off by starting with mentioning what you're going to get out from watching this video. So, everyone uh, everyone understands the importance of dieting and exercise to become healthy, and these are there's various diets to accomplish various goals, but your ability to diet and to do that well has to do with the kind of the tools that you have to do that work. And because food is the tool that we use, if our food is fundamentally flawed, we're going to have a harder time to really have an effective diet. So we really want to know things like what is truly sustainable, because we kind of have this premise where if you eat food that is sustainably raised and it's working in harmony with the land, that you won't have to use as many chemicals, that it's going to be healthier for your body, and all of that is true. It's a synergistic environment that what we're after, and so we also want it to be actually healthy for us. So we want to know, is it sustainable, is it healthy, and then we also want to know kind of what are the things to look out for, because even if things are really healthy in certain ways, there are common pitfalls that happen in the industry. So we want to make sure we can cover all of those. And so in this module, we're going over the cattle specifically and talking about why it's important to raise meat in a certain way, how we do it and how some other people do it, but it's certainly not common. And why that's really important. So I wanted to give a little bit of a backstory about us. I moved to Oklahoma from California with my family about 20 years ago. I was 15 at the time, and we moved to the foothills of the Ozarks up the northeastern side of Oklahoma, and we got started with ranching. And it kind of was a process where we were there for the country lifestyle. We're getting out of the city, and then but it kind of continued to grow on us. And really what inspired us was the works of Joel Salatin and other thought leaders in the regenerative movement. And so we thought, wow, we really should get into growing nutrient dense foods, because we realized that the food at the store was just really not good for us. So we got started. We we got 220 acres of land. We were doing some dairy goats, doing some chickens, some pigs. We had a relationship with this rancher, and he would run his cows on our land, and he would pay us in calves. And so we built our herd that way, and over time we were able to have our own cattle herd. So that's kind of how it got started. And now we're just doing full-time cattle, um, direct sale to farmers, because sorry, to direct sales to customers, because what we realized as farmers was that we didn't want to sell to the auction anymore. So typically the way it works in the cattle industry is you have your herd of cows, they give a certain amount of calves, and you take those calves to the auction, and then the auction ships them off to a feedlot where they're fattened and then they're butchered. So we kind of sold into that model for a while, and we didn't like it. And so we're breaking free of that model, and we've been selling direct to customers for a few years now. We've been trying different models. And so we're really solidifying it now. And we want to grow our farm here to support all of us, and the kids as they grow up. If they want to be involved, we want to have it be a generational regenerative sustainable activity. So that's what we're after. So a little bit about our cows. When we got started with that rancher, he had Black Angus cows, and so that was kind of the breed we got started with. And he believed they had a higher quality meat, and so that's really what he was after. And then we wanted to move into a more sustainable breed that was better with grass finishing. And so we got into the Red Angus to deal with the summer heat a little bit better. And then we're moving into kind of more of a South Pole breed, to kind of really deal with the summer heat and have really good uh, marbling from the grass, that makes the meat really particularly tender. So our cows are, because we've handled them for so long, they're actually like super friendly, and you can kind of walk right up to them. They won't really let you touch them because we've trained them that way, where we, because we need to be able to move them from point A to point B. So we get right next to them, and if I sit down, they'll come right up next to me, and it's just really kind of a cool experience. So um and we think that the environment that we give these cows really does help with the quality of the meat a lot. It's just not you don't have the same issues as you have with the stress related to a feedlot and all these angry cows that are confused. This is more of a very peaceful environment. And even going all the way up to the butcher date, it's all very, very peaceful. The way you should come check out our corrals at some point. Our corrals, we have it's a low stress herding method developed by Bud Williams. Um, it's it's an art called stockmanship, is when you handle the animals in a way that instead of trying to force the animals to do what you want them to do, you focus on aligning the animal's interest with your interest, and so you still get them to do what you want them to do, but they're choosing to do that instead of you forcing them to do that, and so it creates a much more of a harmonious sort of experience for the cows and for us. I wanted to give you a little bit of, for the little background on the genetics. The A lot of people ask me, the first thing they ask me is what breed of cows do you have? And I think it's always a little funny because that's not actually the biggest factor. The biggest factor is really the behavior of the cows, and how good of a fit they are for the property, because you'll have so much variability within the same breed that the breedometer, if you will, is just not really an effective measurement tool. So what we want over time, we have animals that really fit well with the types of forages we have on our land and with the rotational pattern we have, and so that's really what we're after in the end. Okay, so the life in the hoofs of a cow. Okay, so our cows, on kind of an annual cycle, the in the springtime, the grass starts to grow, and comes in with a flush of new growth, and it's very nutritious, but it doesn't have the same sort of density, like carbohydrate density, and so we supplement with hay going into this early spring, and then as it comes in, we rotate them. And they start kind of, the rotational pattern slows down because the forage grows thicker and thicker, and throughout the year we try to focus more on grazing the tips of the grasses because we're trying to grow a dense sward of grass. The idea is to have, like, I think, like 7 to 11 layers blades of grass on top of each other, so that way the ground is really well protected from the summer heat, and it really has the core uh, uh, nutrient store in the crown of the grass plant, and so it's able to really do super well. So and then going into the fall, we continue that grazing cycle, and then once the winter comes, the first hard frost stops the growth cycle. So when the growth cycle stops, whatever forage we have in the field is what they'll continue to graze throughout the winter. But we'll also supplement with hay. And so the better of a growing season we have in the fall, the less hay we have to buy and feed them. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to maximize the growth throughout the year, so that way they can have as much of the high quality nutrient growth in the wintertime. And then that brings us back to the spring again. So in our cow herd, we'll have cows that were growing out to slaughter, and then we have our the cows that are here for producing more cows, and so that'll be our mother cows and the bull. Okay, so diving into this, the cows, different cows are in the herd for different reasons. The mother cows are there to basically produce more calves that will become slaughter animals, and then some of the animals are there uh, to raise for slaughter. So um, if generally what we do is when we have a calf born that's a boy, it'll become a steer, and then that will be used for slaughter. If it's a girl, we will determine, depending upon how well it grows and how good its mother was, we'll determine whether or not we're going to slaughter that animal or whether we're going to keep it for breed stock. So that's kind of the decision matrix that we go through to decide, what role an animal is going to play in the herd. And then our goals for the future is we really want to focus on providing high quality food to our customers. We also want to focus on healing our land and also building a network of other people that are making a difference. And so one of our goals for the cow herd specifically is to really maximize our total production. So what I would actually like to do is find other cow managers that I can buy their calves from them, because I can focus on doing the regenerative grazing really well, and they can focus on doing the herd management really well, and giving them good grass. But it's a different skill set to take care of the breeding process and the birthing process, and actually focusing on fattening up the cattle really well. And so I really want to focus on providing that nutrient, the pure nutrition uh, to my customers. Okay, so now we're going to cover the health impact of what we're doing and how it affects the food that you eat. So the meat that we grow is much more nutritionally dense than the ordinary run of the mill meat, and that's because for actually three reasons. One is the duration of time that the animals are actually grazing. So animals are able to absorb nutrition over a period of time, and the longer that period of time is, the more nutrition they're able to absorb. So we actually, it takes us about 2.5 years right now to fatten a grass fed steer, and that opposed to industry standard of like 18 months. So it takes us a lot longer, and that's because they're just eating grass in the field. And so we don't want to take any shortcuts in that process, and so they have a lot of time to really pack in the nutritional density. The second reason why is because our pastures are biologically active. We're not just feeding them low nutrition food, so they're getting a lot of with each bite that they have access to a lot of good nutrition. And then the third is we actually supplement with minerals that allows them to select what they actually need, because the animals are amazing. They can actually choose which minerals that they need, and they'll know which ones will make them feel better, which is amazing. I mean, I think it's just really really cool. So so on to product purity. The product purity is really defined by, what's the process for that they're using for feeding your animals. Like, is it healthy food? Which for us, it's growing from our biologically active and pure pasture land. But the other element is what is coming from the outside. So do you have a neighboring farm nearby, and their chemical laden fluids off of every rainstorm comes raging through your land, and oopsie, sorry, um, it comes raging through your land, and now you've got a big problem because your lands are all toxic. So that's a huge issue. So and then with product purity, here's another thing to think about with toxic load is that just like nutrient load builds over time, toxic load also builds over time. So if you have an animal and they're having a feed source with a small amount of toxic load, but they're having it throughout their whole life, they will increase their holding of that toxic load. So it makes it much more dramatic, if you will. Um, and then The other thing is the bioavailability of the minerals and really nutrients in general. And so what you have to realize is that uh, all food has nutrition in it, and the thing is that that nutrition is not necessarily of bioavailable to your body. So if you eat it, you don't necessarily absorb that nutrition. It could just go through your body and you don't even absorb it. Um so what's nice about meat is because we're genetically adapted to eat good meat, we've been doing it for a long, long time. Our bodies are naturally able to absorb those minerals and nutrients very readily and so it's a very effective source of um, of remineralizing and getting the nutrition your body needs. All right, now I want to cover a little bit of the ecological impact and kind of dispel some of the myths behind raising cattle. There's a lot of damage that's been done with conventional agriculture, and particularly with animals, with livestock. It has an exponential kind of effect because livestock eat feed for a long time before they're processed, and then they make a smaller amount of feed. And so, if you have an unsustainable process, it's kind of magnified when you're having animal products. However, that being said, the the planet's been adapting for a long time to herbivores, and herbivores are a critical part of the pasture management landscape. And actually, if you think about it, all farmland was pasture. So basically, our ability to increase and improve pasture fertility really plays onto our ability to have productive farmlands, because that's the origin of a good of a good uh, tillable land is a good pasture land. So uh, when it comes to taking care of good pasture, the biggest thing to focus on, and actually really any sort of ecological system, is carbon cycling. And what that means is you're taking carbon that's in the plant matter and you are composting it in the ground. And then the plants reabsorb that nutrition and turn it into new forage. It's that's whole cycle. You're trying to cycle it. And grass is extremely efficient at doing that if there is an herbivore that is trampling it and cycling it down. So when the cows graze, they graze like a quarter of the pasture. Like they graze because the tips of the grasses is what they're after. They're after the tips, and they eat a little bit more. So they might eat 3 inches of the top sugary protein part of the blades, and they might eat a few more inches down below to get more of the starch and the density of the grasses, and they might eat some seeds, but they're going to trample most of it on the ground. And what that does is actually bolsters the sward of the grasses, which locks out the weeds from growing. And it bolsters the microbiology in the soil, because parts of the ripped blades and the broken roots and stuff like that all become available carbon for the microorganisms to eat. And anyone who's done composting and has seen the explosion of life that happens from a good compost pile will know that that is one serious way to unlock nutrition that wouldn't be available if it wasn't active. So one of the benefits of this whole carbon cycling process is actually the water retention in the land goes way up. And this is because the microorganisms, they loosen the soil. They create all these little pathways in the soil where water can go down. They kind of aerate the soil, and the grass sward slows the water down, so the water doesn't just run off the landscape. It eliminates erosion, and it increases just the ability for the water to penetrate the soil. But beyond just the water penetrating the soil, the grass sward, it creates this canopy that stops evaporation from happening very quickly. And so the plants are the soil becomes a more effective mechanism for storing the water throughout the summer months, which allows you get a massive extension of your growing season, which is healthier for the plants and the animals and for everybody. So, um, and then one of the byproducts of doing that is that because you have biologically active soil, those microorganisms are actually remineralizing the soil. They're unlocking nutrients that would be mechanically bound, electrically bound, ionically bound to the soil particles they are releasing those and making them water soluble for the plants to be able to absorb. Also, the cattle, we feed them minerals, and so they're able to, in their own way, remineralize the land. And also, we might be broadcasting some minerals too, depending upon just how depleted areas of land are, because over the years, the pasture lands have been pretty depleted of minerals. So, but in a natural cycle, the land naturally heals itself with the cycle of the carbon, and so I can see that being a long term effect of having a very well run um, ecological system, really. So, and then so we wanted to cover the community impact. How does this affect my family, our life here on the farm, and the local villagers in our community? So we have a very kid-friendly farm. I have 4 children of my own. Um, my sister has her children, and we have gosh, half a dozen families at least just on this block that all have kids, and we like the kids walk back and forth through each other's houses. They play with the animals. It's a very friendly environment for the kids, and so we want to keep it that way. We love children being around, and we think that it's a really good thing for children to be able to have kind of this natural environment to be able to grow up and expect in this over technified world. It's a really handy thing. So one of the other benefits to the community is that we are healing all the land around us, and so over time, a lot of this land will become homesteads, and so it'll be a lot easier for them to have their first garden, to plant an orchard, to have small livestock, because the land's going to be naturally more fertile. There's going to be more nutrients available to them, and so I can see that there's some really big benefits for the long-term community effect just by us managing the land well. So, and then this is our cash cow, pun intended, for our property. So, it makes sense because we've done some pigs before and chickens, and we've done some gardening and stuff, but like our land produces mostly grass, and so to have this symbiotic relationship with a herd of cows is really great for us, because it means that we can do a lot for them. We can give them a really great life, and they can do a lot for us. And so that's really where we're trying to put a lot of focus in, because we believe that focusing on the cows will really help our ranch do well in the long run. So we are planning on doing the pigs and the goats and the sheep and chickens and all of that eventually, with as we grow and we have more people. But the cows is we've really locked into the cows as a healing mechanism for our land. All right, I wanted to cover some of the cow titles. I know that's just an interesting topic for some people. The calves are the offspring from our cows, and we pretty much call them calves all up to 500 pounds, and that's because after 500 pounds, they're pretty much their own unit. They don't need their mother's milk anymore. They're kind of off to the races. Um, then we have our cows, and our cows is like our primary unit. They're the ones that produce more calves. They're we have the most of them in the herd, because they generate the new herd every year. Um, so they're great. The bulls, we don't really have very many bulls, just like 1 or 2 bulls at a time. We have to switch out the bulls to get new genetics in there. But we really don't need that many bulls to breed the herd. And they play an important role. But we don't have too many of those. And then the steers have a pretty much a single track. They're going to be butchered eventually. And because they don't have any, like, they're not pregnant, they don't have any sort of extra additional loads on them, they just get really fat and really muscular, and they're very, very happy. But they also just make a really, really good source of meat when butcher day comes along. And then we have our heifers, and our heifers, we have kind of two paths for the heifers. If they come from a good cow, they look like they're a good cow, we'll keep them to be a future mother cow. But if they're Holy. All right, busy day. So the heifers are we keep them, and they can go to be a mother cow if they come from being a good breed stock, and if they're not a good breed stock, then they will be butchered too. So those are kind of the different categories for the cows in our herd. Now I want to cover why our cows know that they're special, and I hope they do know, because we put a lot of work into into making their lives just fantastic. One is the rotational grazing. So we give our cows fresh pasture almost every day in the growing season, and it's for a couple of reasons. One is that if we do it like most farmers, where they just have access to a large field and they just have access to plenty of pasture, then what happens is they overgraze certain areas. They don't touch other areas until they get over mature, and then the food's not very good. They'll eat the sweet grasses first, and then they'll leave the vegetable grasses till later, just like the kids would on a plate of food. Like it becomes a huge mess. And so then the way that the conventional farmers remedy that is by, if you overgraze and you keep the grasses small, but then you supplement with feed, and then you give them chemical, like there's just all these other things that they do to make it work. But when you manage your pastures through a rotational grazing process, you're really mimicking what the buffalo of the field used to do for thousands of years, and any other herbivore for that matter. They move in these big herds, and they'd always be on the move, and they'd give the ground plenty of time to rest afterwards. So that's what the whole rotational grazing process is all about, and it's been proven to build soil over time, and it explodes the microorganisms, and it carbon cycles. It takes carbon from the air and it sequesters it into the ground. And so that whole process is a very sustainable regenerative process. We're not talking just about not using as much energy to create. We're talking about actually reducing the total amount of carbon in the air, and putting it in the ground where it can be fertile and grow more food. That's what carbon is. It is the building block that allows us to grow more food. The other reason why our cows know that they're special is because we give them fresh water, and other ranchers oftentimes don't. They'll just give them access into a pond where they'll drink from the same pond. It'll grow all sorts of parasites in the pond, and also it gets really mucky and gross, and it's a taxing load on the system. And because we're trying to use as few chemicals as possible, we can't just throw antibiotics at them or throw um, stuffs to manage pink eye. That's a big problem if they're around dirty water all the time. So we always try to provide good quality clean water to them, and it also helps with our grazing process too. So we do have a lot of freshwater ponds on the property, so they will have access to those ponds, but usually it's like for a few hours, because what I'll do is I will graze uh I take their paddock and I split up into cells, and I'll have them graze the parts of the paddock that are not where the pond is. And right before I move them out, I'll give them access to the water, and so they will flash graze the pond bank, and they'll agitate the water, but they're not going to basically make the water anaerobic, kill the fish, and kind of putrefy that whole wildlife situation. Um, and the other reason why our cows know they're special is because we have we actually have a lot of paddocks on the land, and that allows us to really give complete recovery time to the various pastures that the cows are in. And so when they're moved into a new pasture, it's completely fresh, it's completely recovered. The land loves it because the land does really well with periods of intense grazing and then intense relaxation, kind of like people do sometimes too. So it's a time periods of stress, time periods of rest, and you want to cycle between those two. And too much rest or too much stress is not a good thing. So that's another reason why our practices are different. Now we do a lot of videos about this, and we'd love to share more. But this is wrapping up our virtual farm tour for the cattle. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of this. And I'd love to answer any more questions you might have on it. And so I wanted to give you kind of 3 actionable steps you can take after watching this video, things that you can do, really simple stuff. One is just remember that store-bought meat is not equal to farm-grown meat. And so here's what this means. You could potentially, like, a farm could sell meat to a grocery store, and the grocery store could sell the meat to you. And that could be a really, like, kind of a good process in a way. But regardless of how unlikely that is to happen, it's not actually beneficial because you've got them you don't have the transparency. You need to have a connection between the farmer that's actually doing the work, that's telling their story. You need to have a connection between them and sourcing your food, because there is so much that can go wrong in that process, and does every day, honestly. So it's really important to know that. And here's the thing. The reason to go shopping at the store used to be really important, because, like, all these people are in the city. You couldn't really communicate with the farmer, and so you needed to go to one place to get your food. And there wasn't a communication network really set up, and so you had to trust your local grocer to sort he would source the food well, and you would just buy from them. And then what happened is, later we got all into labeling. We're like, oh, labels will save us, because now we can choose organic, or now we can choose USDA certified, etc. And so we think, okay, this is going to help us, but all that's really controlled by big government organization, big business. And so it's not actually a true indicator, and so it's misleading, is what it ends up being in the end. So buying directly from people that you know is just fundamentally different. So just remember that. The second thing to do is to support the farmers that care. And the thing is that uh, farming is a lot of work, and it's, in some ways, it's a dying breed, because the average age of the American farmer is like over 65 years old. On average, farms lose money; they don't make money, and so it's a tough road. So, but it's necessary, because otherwise we're going to go into a factory-based world where everything we'll have is artificial, and it's just not good. So, we need to put special effort towards supporting uh, farmers that care, the agricultural movement in general, and that's the way we can really lock in good, healthy food that we know is good in the future. And then the third thing is to be part of the solution, and this is kind of a broader thing, because um, you know, you could buy from your local farmer, but you can also share their Facebook posts. You can also share their Instagram reels, and there's ways to be part of the solution that isn't strictly just spending money. Like, that's not the end all be all. And then the other thing too is that, we can all support each other, but we also, each of us has the ability to take action on our own, in our own special way. And so really looking at it, being like, what is the way I can help to support the cause for healthy food, and understanding the problem, which will help us to eventually get to that more sustainable, healthy world that we all want to be part of someday. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this, and I hope you have a healthy and a pure life. So take care.